The candlelight flickered across the kitchen, casting shadows that danced like accusations. Rosalind froze, mouth full of stolen bread, her heart hammering against her ribs as the Duke of Silvermere stepped out of the darkness. He was still fully dressed at this ungodly hour, his cravat loosened, his dark hair disheveled as though he'd been running his hands through it. Those piercing blue eyes locked onto her with the precision of a predator who'd finally cornered his prey. "Lady Eleanor," he said, his voice smooth as velvet and twice as dangerous. "What a surprise to find you raiding the larder at midnight. How terribly common." Rose swallowed the bread, nearly choking on it. She set down the cheese, her fingers trembling. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but there was nowhere to go. He moved closer, each step deliberately slow, until he had her trapped against the counter. The heat of his body radiated through the thin silk of her borrowed nightgown. "Will you now tell me who you are?" His voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but it thundered in her ears. "I'm Eleanor Pemberton." The lie tasted like ash on her tongue. "No, you're not." He leaned in, his breath ghosting across her cheek. "You have her face, her eyes, her smile. But you're not her. You play chess like a master. You hate the opera. You have a servant's hands and a lady's face." His fingers caught her wrist, thumb pressing against the calluses she'd failed to hide. "So I'll ask you one more time, and I suggest you tell me the truth. Who are you?" The world tilted. 3 weeks of lies, of playing pretend, of desperately trying to be someone she wasn't. All of it came crashing down in that moment. Rose looked up at the man who held her future in his hands, the man who could see right through every carefully constructed facade, and made a choice that would change everything. "I'm her twin sister," she whispered, and watched his eyes widen. "Her illegitimate twin sister," she said again. But that confession was still days away from where our story truly begins. If you're already hooked and want to see how Rosalind ended up trapped in the Duke's kitchen in the middle of the night, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more Regency drama, and share this with anyone who loves a good forbidden romance. You won't want to miss what happens next. Now, let's go back to where it all started. The servants' quarters at Pemberton Park smelled of lye soap and desperation. Rosalind scrubbed the marble floors of the grand ballroom, her hands raw and aching, watching through the open doors as her sister glided across the polished surface in a gown that cost more than Rose would earn in a lifetime. Lady Eleanor Margaret Pemberton, legitimate daughter of the late Earl, moved with the practiced grace of someone who'd never questioned her place in the world. Same auburn hair, same hazel eyes, same face that Rose saw in the cracked mirror above her cot each morning, but different in every way that mattered. Eleanor caught her eye across the expanse of gleaming floor. For a moment, their gazes held. Then Eleanor looked away, shame coloring her perfect porcelain cheeks, and Rose felt the familiar burn of resentment curl in her chest. She dunked her brush back in the bucket and scrubbed harder. Midnight came with a soft knock on Rose's door. She sat up on her narrow bed, confusion giving way to shock as Eleanor slipped inside, a dark cloak over her nightgown, her eyes red from crying. "I need you to be me," Eleanor said without preamble. "Just for one night." Rose stared at her sister, this girl who did everything handed to her while Rose had nothing. "You've lost your mind." "I'm eloping with Thomas, the groom. We love each other, Rose. Truly, desperately love each other." Eleanor's hands twisted in her cloak. "I'm supposed to attend a house party tomorrow. To meet the Duke of Silvermere. Aunt Prudence arranged it. She needs me to marry him because she's been stealing from my dowry, and if I don't marry well, she'll be exposed and ruined." "Then marry the Duke." Rose's voice was flat. "You're engaged to him. It's your duty." "I don't love him. I'll be miserable for the rest of my life, trapped in a marriage to a man I've never met while the man I actually love is cast out like rubbish." Tears streamed down Eleanor's face. "Please, Rose. You're my sister. My twin. We're the only family each of us has. I'll be gone by dawn. Just attend the party as me. Tell them I'm ill. By the time they realize I'm truly gone, Thomas and I will be in Scotland, married, beyond their reach." Rose should have said no. Should have slammed the door in her privileged sister's face. Should have let the girl who'd watched her scrub floors without lifting a finger face the consequences of her own choices for once in her pampered life. But Eleanor was crying. And beneath all the resentment, the bitterness, the rage at the injustice of their births, she was still Rose's sister. One night, Rose heard herself say, "That's all you get." Eleanor's face transformed with relief. She kissed Rose's cheek, pressed a bundle of clothes into her arms. "One night. I promise. I'll send word as soon as we're safely wed. Thank you, Rose. Thank you." She was gone before the first birds sang, and she didn't send word. The carriage that arrived the next morning was the finest thing Rose had ever seen. She climbed inside wearing Eleanor's traveling dress, the silk foreign against her skin, the corset so tight she could barely breathe. Lady Prudence Ashworth sat across from her, Eleanor's guardian, their father's sister. Her eyes were sharp as cut glass. "Remember, Rosalind," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "You are Eleanor. You will speak only when spoken to. You will be demure, obedient, and utterly forgettable. If you embarrass this family, if you give anyone even the slightest reason to suspect you're not who you claim to be, I will personally ensure you hang for fraud. Do you understand me?" Rose understood perfectly. She was trapped in a gilded cage of her sister's making, and Lady Prudence held the key. Ravenscroft Manor rose from the countryside like something from a fairy tale, all honey-colored stone and soaring windows. Rose had cleaned houses like this, had scrubbed their floors and emptied their chamber pots, but she'd never entered one through the front door as a guest. Footmen rushed to help her from the carriage. A butler announced her arrival. Ladies in silk gowns turned to appraise her with calculating eyes. And then she saw him. Isaac Sinclair, Duke of Silvermere, stood by the window of the grand ballroom, silhouetted against the dying light. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and devastatingly handsome in a way that made Rose's breath catch. Dark hair fell across his forehead. His profile was all sharp angles and aristocratic lines. But it was his eyes that stopped her heart when he turned. They were the blue of a winter sky, beautiful and utterly cold. He looked at the assembled guests the way a merchant might survey inventory, detached and calculating. Those eyes found her across the crowded room. Rose felt the impact like a physical thing. He moved toward her with predatory grace, and she fought the urge to run. "Lady Eleanor." His voice was deep, cultured, edged with something she couldn't name. He took her gloved hand and bowed over it, lips barely brushing her knuckles. Even through the silk, she felt the heat of his mouth. "At last. You're even lovelier than your portrait suggested." It was a compliment that felt like a business assessment. Rose curtsied, praying her knees wouldn't buckle. "Your Grace. The pleasure is mine." "Is it?" One dark eyebrow arched. "How refreshing. Most young ladies pretend indifference to seem more desirable. I appreciate honesty." Something about his tone suggested he didn't believe a word she said. Rose's stomach dropped. Could he already see through her disguise? No, that was impossible. She and Eleanor were identical. He'd never even met Eleanor in person, only exchanged letters. Letters that Rose hadn't written. Letters where Eleanor had probably gushed about needlework and opera and all the insipid things proper ladies were supposed to enjoy. "I'm afraid I'm quite terrible at games, Your Grace," Rose said carefully. "I prefer directness." "How novel." His eyes held hers for a beat too long. "We shall get along splendidly then. Come, let me introduce you to our host." He offered his arm. Rose took it, feeling the hard muscle beneath his sleeve, and let him lead her into the glittering crowd. Every eye followed them. Every whisper dissected her gown, her posture, her worth. Rose had spent her life invisible, a shadow in her own home. This scrutiny felt like being flayed alive. That evening, they attended the opera. Rose sat beside Isaac in his private box, the seats so close their arms nearly touched. The opera house glittered with candlelight and jewels, the cream of London society arrayed in their finest. The curtain rose. The soprano began to sing. And Rose wanted to die of boredom. She'd never been to an opera before. Had imagined it might be beautiful, transcendent, the divine art form Eleanor's letters had described. Instead, it was interminable. The plot was incomprehensible. The singing was shrill. Her corset cut into her ribs with every breath. She shifted in her seat, trying to find a position that didn't make her want to scream. "Are you quite well, Lady Eleanor?" Isaac's voice was low, meant only for her ears. "You seem uncomfortable." "I'm perfectly well, Your Grace." Rose forced herself to sit still, to appear enraptured by the screeching on stage. "Curious. I had the impression from your letters that you adored opera, that you found it the most divine art form known to man. Those were your exact words, I believe." Rose's heart stuttered. Of course Eleanor had written that. Perfect, cultured Eleanor, who probably really did love the opera. Rose scrambled for a response that wouldn't expose her. "I do adore it. I simply find myself overwhelmed by the beauty of the performance." "Overwhelmed? I see." The opera droned on, and Rose's eyelids grew heavy. She'd been awake since dawn, sick with nerves, and the combination of the warm theater and her exhaustion was lethal. She fought to stay conscious, pinching her arm beneath her sleeve, biting the inside of her cheek. But the soprano hit a particularly long, warbling note, and Rose's head drooped. She jerked awake to find herself slumped against Isaac's shoulder, her cheek pressed to the fine wool of his coat. Mortification flooded through her. She sat up so fast her vision swam. "Forgive me, Your Grace. I don't know what came over me." Isaac stared down at her, and for the first time, she saw something flicker in those cold eyes. "You fell asleep during what you described in your letters as the most divine art form known to man." "I was simply so moved by the music that I was transported to a state of transcendent peace." "You were snoring." Heat flooded her face. "I do not snore." "You don't? Well, that's fascinating. Because Lady Eleanor, in her letters, mentioned that she was such a delicate sleeper that the slightest sound would wake her. She most certainly did not snore." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Tell me, Lady Eleanor, what other details about yourself have you forgotten?" Rose's mind raced. She'd made a mistake, shown emotion, reacted like herself instead of the demure, perfect Eleanor. Every instinct screamed at her to make an excuse, to simper and apologize and play the vapid debutante. Instead, she lifted her chin and met his gaze directly. "Perhaps, Your Grace, you should consider that people contain multitudes. Those letters, however charming, cannot capture the full complexity of a person. Or perhaps you simply bore me." The words were out before she could stop them. She watched Isaac's eyes widen, watched something that looked almost like delight flash across his face before his mask of aristocratic indifference slammed back into place. "How refreshing," he murmured. "The real Lady Eleanor finally emerges." But he was wrong. The real Eleanor would never have spoken to a duke that way. Rose had just revealed herself as someone else entirely, and from the calculating gleam in Isaac's eyes, he knew it. The opera finally, mercifully, ended. Rose fled to her rooms, her heart pounding. She'd ruined everything on the first night. Tomorrow Isaac would expose her, Eleanor would be disgraced, and Rose would hang for fraud. She didn't sleep. Dawn broke grey and cold over Ravenscroft Manor. Rose dressed in another of Eleanor's gowns, this one pale blue silk that made her feel like a fraud playing dress-up. A maid came to fetch her for breakfast, but Rose couldn't face food. Instead, she slipped into the gardens, desperate for air, for space to think. Running away so soon, Lady Eleanor. Rose spun to find Isaac standing on the terrace, immaculately dressed despite the early hour. He descended the steps with that same predatory grace, moving toward her through the morning mist. "I'm not running. I'm simply taking the air," she argued. "Of course." He fell into step beside her, hands clasped behind his back. "I trust you slept well after your transcendent experience at the opera." Rose gritted her teeth. "Quite well, thank you." They walked in silence along the gravel paths, past perfectly manicured hedges and rose bushes just beginning to bloom. Rose was acutely aware of his presence beside her, the breadth of his shoulders, the way he shortened his stride to match hers. This close, she could smell his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her head spin. "I received several of your letters," Isaac said conversationally. "You wrote quite extensively about your needlework. You mentioned completing a tapestry of your family crest. Quite impressive, you said. It took you nearly a year." Rose's stomach clenched. "Yes. I'm very proud of it." "I'm sure you are." He paused beside a fountain, turning to face her. "May I see your hands?" "I beg your pardon." "Your hands, Lady Eleanor. I'd like to see them." There was no refusing. Rose extended her hands, still gloved. Isaac's fingers closed around her wrist, and even through the kid leather, she felt the heat of his touch. Slowly, deliberately, he began to peel off her glove. "Your Grace, this is hardly proper." "Humor me," he scoffed. The glove came off. Rose's hand lay bare in his palm, and she watched his eyes trace the calluses on her fingers, the rough skin that came from years of scrubbing floors and hauling water. Not from needles. Isaac's thumb pressed against the worst of the calluses, and his eyes lifted to hers. "Remarkable. Your tapestry work must have been quite vigorous to produce such marks." "I also enjoy gardening. Very vigorous gardening," she added quickly. "In your letters, you mentioned how you despised getting your hands dirty, how you left all gardening to the staff." Rose yanked her hand back, shoving it behind her back. "People change, Your Grace." "Indeed they do." His smile was sharp as a blade. "Tell me, Lady Eleanor, do you play chess?" The question caught her off guard. No, I don't." "What a pity. I was hoping for a game after breakfast. But of course, if you don't play." He turned as if to leave. Rose's pride flared. Her mother had taught her chess, using pieces carved from kitchen scraps, stolen moments in the servants' quarters where they'd plot strategy and dream of better lives. Rose was good at chess. Excellent even. "Actually," she heard herself say, "I play a little. I'm sure I could manage a game." Isaac's smile was triumphant. "Excellent. I'll have the board set up in the library. Shall we say this evening, after dinner?" He walked away, leaving Rose standing beside the fountain, realizing she'd just walked straight into whatever trap he was setting. Dinner that evening was an exercise in torture. Rose sat at the long table surrounded by London's elite, picking at pheasant she couldn't taste while maintaining conversation with Lady Pembroke about the weather. The entire time, she felt Isaac's eyes on her from across the table, studying her like a puzzle he was determined to solve. When the ladies retired to the drawing room, Rose counted the minutes until she could escape. But Lady Prudence appeared at her elbow, fingers digging into Rose's arm. "What did you do?" Her aunt's voice was barely above a hiss. "I don't know what you mean. The Duke has been watching you all evening like you're a fascinating specimen. You were supposed to be forgettable. Demure. Instead, you're drawing the worst kind of attention." Prudence's nails bit through the silk of Rose's sleeve. "Fix this. Tonight. Or I'll fix it for you." The threat hung in the air as Prudence swept away, leaving Rose's arm hurting and her stomach churning with dread. A footman appeared at her side. "Lady Eleanor, His Grace requests your presence in the library." The chess game. Rose had almost forgotten. The library was a cathedral of books, leather-bound volumes rising to a ceiling painted with classical scenes. A fire crackled in the massive hearth. And there, beside a window overlooking the darkened gardens, sat Isaac at a small table with an ivory chess set arrayed between two chairs. "Lady Eleanor. Punctual. I appreciate that." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Please, sit." Rose settled into the seat, eyeing the board. The pieces were exquisite, hand-carved, probably worth more than she'd earn in 10 lifetimes of scrubbing floors. "White or black?" Isaac asked. "Black. Always better to see your opponent's strategy first." Isaac moved his pawn, opening with a standard king's pawn game. Rose countered, and they played in silence for several moves. Then Isaac advanced his bishop, setting up what Rose recognized immediately as a scholar's mate attempt. A beginner's trap. An insult to her person. He thought she was stupid. and fall for the most obvious gambit in chess. Rage, hot and familiar, surged through Rose's chest. She should lose deliberately. Should giggle and move pieces at random like Eleanor probably would have. Should play the vapid debutante everyone expected. Instead, she blocked his attack, countered with her knight, and 3 moves later had his queen pinned between her bishop and rook. Check. Isaac's hand froze halfway to his king. His eyes lifted from the board to her face, and Rose saw the exact moment he understood. She watched calculation give way to fascination, then give way to something darker, more dangerous. "Remarkable," he murmured, "for someone who doesn't play." Rose's heart hammered. She'd done it again, revealed too much, let her pride override her common sense. "I said I played a little. I didn't say I played poorly." "No, you didn't." Isaac studied the board, then moved his king. "Your mother taught you, didn't she? The letters mentioned your mother died when you were young." Another trap. Rose scrambled to remember what Eleanor had told her about their father's wife, the Countess. "She did. Before she passed, she taught me many things." "How sentimental." Isaac captured one of her pawns. "Though I must confess, the Countess of Pemberton was known throughout London as a woman who believed chess was beneath a lady's dignity. She famously refused to allow it in her household. Strange that she would have taught her daughter to play with such skill." The room froze. Rose stared at the board, at her pieces that screamed the truth of who she really was. A servant's daughter who'd learned chess in stolen moments, not a countess's child raised to embroider and simper. "Perhaps you just didn't know her as well as you thought." The words came out sharper than intended. Isaac's smile was slow, predatory. "Perhaps I didn't know her at all." He leaned back in his chair, abandoning all pretense of the game. "But I'm beginning to know you, Lady Eleanor, and you are far more interesting than your letters suggested." "People are full of surprises," she quipped. "Indeed they are." His eyes never left hers. "Tell me, what else have you been hiding?" The truth screamed inside her chest, demanding release. She was hiding everything, nothing but lies wrapped in silk, and he was going to unravel her thread by thread until nothing remained. Rose stood abruptly. "I find I'm quite fatigued, Your Grace. Perhaps we can continue another time." "Running away, Lady Eleanor." "Retiring. There's a difference." She fled before he could respond, before those piercing eyes could strip away any more of her carefully constructed facade. Behind her, she heard the soft click of chess pieces being put away, and she knew with absolute certainty that Isaac Sinclair was not done with her. The next 3 days were hell. Isaac watched her constantly, cataloguing every mistake, every slip. When she tripped going down the stairs and caught herself on the banister, his eyebrow raised. When she spoke passionately about the corn laws at dinner, forgetting that Eleanor had never read a newspaper, he smiled that dangerous smile. When a servant dropped a tray and Rose automatically moved to help clean it up before remembering herself, she looked up to find Isaac observing from across the room. He was hunting her, and she was running out of places to hide. Rose took to avoiding him, pleading headaches, hiding in her rooms. But she couldn't hide forever. The house party would end soon, and Isaac would either propose or he wouldn't, and either way, her sister's future hung in the balance. Eleanor still hadn't sent word. Rose had written 3 letters to Scotland, each more desperate than the last, and received nothing in return. She was trapped, alone, drowning in a role she'd never auditioned for. On the 4th night, Rose couldn't sleep. Anxiety clawed at her throat. She paced her room until the walls felt like they were closing in, then slipped out into the darkened hallways. The house was silent, everyone abed. She made her way to the kitchens through servants' passages she instinctively knew, old habits guiding her feet. The kitchens were blessedly empty, still warm from the day's cooking. Rose found bread and cheese in the larder, stuffed her mouth with both, savoring the simple comfort of food she didn't have to eat delicately with proper utensils. For just a moment, she could stop pretending. Could stop being Eleanor and just be Rose, hungry and frightened and desperately homesick for a home that had never wanted her. "Lady Eleanor, what a surprise to find you raiding the larder at midnight. How terribly common." The voice cut through the darkness like a blade. Rose whirled, bread falling from her hands, to find Isaac stepping out of the shadows. He was still fully dressed despite the late hour, his cravat loosened, dark hair disheveled as though he'd been running his hands through it. Those eyes, blue as winter ice, locked onto her. Her heart stopped. Started again. Too fast, too hard. Your Grace. I didn't expect anyone to be awake. Clearly. He moved closer, each step measured, deliberate. Though I must say, I didn't expect to find the future Duchess of Silvermere eating like a scullery maid in the middle of the night. Rose set down the cheese with trembling fingers. I was hungry. So it seems. He kept coming until he had her backed against the counter, until she could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the brandy on his breath. Or were you simply being yourself for the first time since you arrived? I don't know what you mean. Isaac's hand slammed down on the counter beside her head, and Rose flinched. Don't lie to me anymore. I've spent 10 years reading people to survive, learning to see through every facade, every mask. You think I don't know exactly what you are? And what am I? Rose's voice came out barely above a whisper. A fraud. The word hung between them, damning and absolute. Rose's throat closed. This was it. The moment everything fell apart. Who are you? Isaac demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Because you are most definitely not Lady Eleanor Pemberton. Rose could have kept lying. She could have protested, played innocent, gasped in shock at such an outrageous accusation. But she was so tired of pretending, so exhausted by the weight of Eleanor's life pressing down on her shoulders. I'm her twin sister. The confession ripped out of her like a wound. Her illegitimate twin sister. Eleanor eloped with the groom. She begged me to cover for her, just for one night. That was a week ago. She's not coming back. Isaac went very still. Rose watched emotions flicker across his face too fast to read, before his expression settled into something cold and calculating. Then he started to laugh. It was a dark, bitter sound that raised the hairs on Rose's arms. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. The universe just handed me exactly what I need. What are you talking about? He stepped back, began to pace, one hand dragging through his hair. This is perfect. Better than perfect. Have you lost your mind? Isaac spun to face her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. Marry me. As Eleanor. The world tilted. You're insane. I'm practical. His voice was matter-of-fact, discussing the weather. I need Lady Eleanor Pemberton's dowry. It's the only one in England large enough to save my estate. Without it, 400 tenant families lose their homes. People who have served the Dukedom of Silvermere for generations will starve. He stepped closer. And you need protection from fraud charges when this scheme inevitably collapses. If you're loving this twisted romance and want to see how Rose and Isaac's dangerous bargain plays out, hit that like button, subscribe so you don't miss the next part, and drop a comment telling me if you think Rose should accept his proposal or run for her life. Seriously, I need to know what you'd do in her situation. Now back to the story, because things are about to get even more complicated. That's bigamy, Rose hissed. Fraud. I could hang. Then I suggest you play Lady Eleanor flawlessly. Isaac's eyes were hard as diamonds. Because the alternative is I expose you right now. Eleanor is ruined. Your family's name is destroyed. You're arrested for fraud and impersonating nobility. They'll hang you for this, you know. It's not just fraud. It's theft, attempted theft of a dowry worth thousands of pounds. Rose's hands clenched into fists at her sides. You're a bastard. Undoubtedly. He didn't even have the grace to look ashamed. But I'm a bastard with 400 families depending on me. So what's your answer? Marry me and live as a duchess, or refuse and die as a fraud? That's not a choice. No, Isaac agreed quietly. It's not. But it's the only one you have. Rose wanted to scream, to throw something, to claw that aristocratic smugness off his perfect face. She'd traded one prison for another, escaped a life of servitude only to be trapped in an even more elaborate cage. But Isaac was right about one thing: she had no choice. If he exposed her, she'd hang. At least this way, she'd survive. "Fine," she spat. "I'll do it. I'll marry you and play your perfect little duchess. But don't expect me to pretend I don't despise you." Something flickered in Isaac's eyes, there and gone too fast to identify. "I wouldn't dream of it." He extended his hand. "Do we have an agreement?" Rose stared at that outstretched hand, at the long fingers and aristocratic bearing, at the signet ring that marked him as a duke while she was nothing but a bastard pretending at nobility. Taking his hand meant sealing her fate, binding herself to this cold, calculating man who saw her as nothing more than a means to an end. She took it. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong, and Rose felt the shock of contact race up her arm. For just a moment, Isaac's mask slipped. She saw confusion there, and something that might have been regret, before his expression smoothed back into aristocratic indifference. "Excellent. We'll announce our engagement tomorrow evening. Until then, you continue to be Lady Eleanor. Speak to no one about this arrangement." "What about Eleanor? When she comes back?" "If she comes back," Isaac corrected, "we'll deal with it then. For now, you are Lady Eleanor Pemberton, and you're madly in love with your intended husband." His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Think you can manage that?" "I've been managing for a week." "So you have." He released her hand, stepped back, but his eyes never left hers. "One more thing. We'll need to be convincing. The tongue watches everything, dissecting every glance, every touch. We'll need to appear besotted." "I can act besotted." "Can you?" Isaac moved closer again, and Rose's pulse kicked up. Because acting and being convincing are two different things. The matrons of London have been watching couples fall in and out of love for decades. They'll know if we're pretending. "Then what do you suggest?" His hand rose to cup her face, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. The touch was feather-light, but it burned. "We practice." Rose's breath caught. Practice. Intimacy. Affection. The small gestures that signal a couple in love. His thumb traced to the corner of her mouth. "May I kiss you?" Her heart was trying to beat its way out of her chest. "Is that necessary?" "We'll need to kiss at the engagement announcement. Better to get the first one over with in private, don't you think?" It was logical. Practical. Everything about this arrangement was a cold business transaction. So why did Rose's skin feel like it was on fire? "Fine," she whispered. Isaac's other hand settled on her waist, drawing her closer. "Put your hand on my chest." Rose obeyed, feeling his heartbeat beneath her palm. Steady. Controlled. Nothing like her own racing pulse. "Now I'm going to kiss you," he said softly. "Don't flinch." "I won't." His mouth captured hers, and Rose's world exploded. She'd never been kissed before. She'd imagined it might be pleasant, sweet, romantic. This was none of those things. This was fire and drowning and flying all at once. Isaac's lips moved against hers with practiced skill, coaxing a response she didn't know she was capable of giving. His hand tightened on her waist, pulling her flush against him, and Rose gasped against his mouth. He deepened the kiss, his tongue sliding against hers, and Rose's fingers twisted in his shirt. Heat pooled low in her belly. She couldn't think, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but feel. When he pulled back, they were both breathing hard. Isaac's pupils were blown wide, his carefully controlled expression cracked open. For one moment, Rose saw raw confusion there, and want, and something that looked like fear. Then his mask slammed back into place. He stepped away, adjusting his cravat with hands that trembled slightly. "That will do," he said, his voice rougher than before. "We'll perform similarly for the announcement tomorrow evening." He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the frame. "Get some sleep, Lady Eleanor. Tomorrow your new life begins." Then he was gone, leaving Rose alone in the kitchen, her lips still burning, her heart in pieces, wondering what kind of devil's bargain she'd just made. She touched her mouth where he'd kissed her, and felt the first crack form in the walls around her heart. This was supposed to be business. A transaction. A marriage of convenience to save them both. So why did that kiss feel like it had changed everything? Rose didn't sleep. She lay in Eleanor's bed, staring at the canopy above her, reliving that kiss over and over until her lips felt bruised from memory alone. It was supposed to be practice. A rehearsal for the performance they'd give the ton. So why did her chest ache like something vital had been ripped out of it? Morning came too quickly. A maid arrived with chocolate and pastries, helped Rose into a gown of deep emerald silk that made her eyes look more green than hazel. The girl chatted about the excitement of the day, how all the guests were speculating about whether His Grace would make an announcement tonight. If only she knew the truth. Lady Prudence arrived as the maid was pinning up Rose's hair. She dismissed the girl with a wave, then turned those sharp eyes on Rose. "You've done something," Prudence said flatly. "I can see it on your face." Rose met her gaze in the mirror. "I don't know what you mean." "The Duke requested a private audience with me this morning. He's asked permission to announce your engagement tonight." Prudence's fingers dug into Rose's shoulder. "What did you do to secure his proposal so quickly? Did you compromise yourself? Throw yourself at him like some desperate?" "He proposed because he wants to marry Eleanor," Rose interrupted, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. "Isn't that what you wanted?" Prudence studied her for a long moment. "See that you don't ruin this. One misstep tonight, and I'll personally ensure you hang for what you've done." After Prudence left, Rose's hands shook so badly she could barely fasten her necklace. A knock at the door made her jump. She opened it to find a footman holding a small box. "From His Grace, my lady." Inside the box lay a ring. Not just any ring, a sapphire the size of her thumbnail surrounded by diamonds that caught the light like captured stars. A note accompanied it in Isaac's precise handwriting: "Wear this tonight. We must be convincing. I.S." Rose slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the weight of it foreign and strange. She was really doing this. Binding herself to a man who saw her as a business transaction, pretending to be someone she wasn't, all to save a sister who'd abandoned her. The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Rose took tea with the other ladies, smiled and nodded through conversations about fashion and gossip, all while feeling Isaac's ring burning on her finger like a brand. She caught glimpses of him throughout the day, across the lawn during a garden party, in the library when she passed by, always surrounded by other guests, always with that cool, aristocratic mask in place. But once, just once, their eyes met across the drawing room. The intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. Then someone spoke to him, and the moment shattered. Evening arrived with the weight of an executioner's blade. Rose dressed in a gown of midnight blue silk that Eleanor had packed, the bodice cut lower than anything she'd ever worn. Sapphires glittered at her throat and ears, borrowed from the Pemberton family vault. She looked like a duchess. She felt like a fraud. The ballroom glittered with hundreds of candles. The cream of London society filled the space, their jewels and silks a kaleidoscope of wealth and privilege. Rose entered on Lady Prudence's arm, her heart hammering so hard she thought everyone must hear it. Isaac stood near the musician's dais, devastating in black evening wear. When he saw her, something flickered in his eyes. He crossed the room to her, moving through the crowd like Moses parting the sea. "Lady Eleanor." He bowed over her hand, his lips brushing her knuckles. The touch sent sparks up her arm. "You look exquisite." "Your Grace." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. He offered his arm. "Dance with me." Moved onto the floor as the orchestra began a waltz. Isaac's hand settled on her waist, pulling her closer than strictly proper. They began to move, and Rose was grateful for those practice sessions, because her mind had gone blank with panic. "Breathe," Isaac murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "You're doing beautifully. I feel like I'm going to be sick." "Don't. I had this waistcoat specially made." His tone was light, but his hand tightened on her waist, steadying her. "Just follow my lead. Look at me like you did last night, when I kissed you." Rose's eyes snapped to his face. That was practice. Was it? Something dark and dangerous moved in his expression. Then practice again. Now, make them believe you're falling in love with me. Make them believe. As if she had to pretend. As if that kiss hadn't already started the fall. Rose let her guard drop, just a fraction. Let herself look at Isaac, really look at him. At the sharp line of his jaw, the slight curl to his dark hair, the way his eyes crinkled just barely at the corners when he almost smiled. At the man behind the mask, the one she'd glimpsed in the kitchen last night when his control had slipped. Isaac's breath caught. His hand on her waist trembled, just once. Rose. Her name, her real name, whispered so softly only she could hear. It undid her completely. The waltz ended. The room erupted in polite applause. Isaac kept her hand in his as he led her to the dais where their host stood. Lord Ravenscroft smiled broadly, already knowing what was coming. "My lords, ladies, and gentlemen," Isaac's voice rang out across the ballroom. The crowd quieted instantly. "I have an announcement to make. Lady Eleanor Pemberton has done me the extraordinary honor of accepting my proposal of marriage. We are engaged." The ballroom exploded with applause and excited chatter. Ladies rushed forward to congratulate Rose, their eyes alight with curiosity and envy. Gentlemen clapped Isaac on the back. The orchestra struck up a celebratory tune. And through it all, Rose felt like she was drowning. Isaac pulled her close, one hand cupping her face in full view of everyone. "Now I kiss you," he whispered. "Make it convincing." His mouth claimed hers, and the world fell away. Rose forgot about the crowd, about the lies, about everything except the feel of his lips moving against hers. She kissed him back with everything she had, pouring all her confusion and fear and desperate, terrifying hope into that single moment of connection. When they broke apart, the ballroom was cheering. Isaac's eyes were dark, his breathing uneven. For just a second, his mask cracked completely, and Rose saw raw vulnerability there. "That was convincing," he said hoarsely. "Yes," Rose whispered. "It was." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and champagne toasts. Rose played her part perfectly, clinging to Isaac's arm, blushing at the appropriate moments, accepting well wishes from people she'd never met. Lady Prudence watched from across the room like a hawk, but even she couldn't find fault with Rose's performance. It was nearly midnight when Isaac pulled her aside, into an alcove away from prying eyes. "You did well tonight," he said. "So did you." They stood in awkward silence, the air between them charged with everything they weren't saying. "Isaac," Rose started, then stopped. What could she possibly say? That the kiss had felt real? That she was starting to care for him beyond their arrangement? That terrified her more than Lady Prudence's threats. "Don't." Isaac's voice was sharp. "Whatever you're about to say, don't. This is a business arrangement. Nothing more. Tonight was a performance for the ton. That's all it can be." The words hit like a slap. Rose stepped back, lifting her chin. "Of course, Your Grace. Forgive me for thinking otherwise." She swept past him, back into the ballroom, her eyes burning with tears she refused to let fall. Behind her, she heard Isaac curse softly, but she didn't turn back. The house party ended the next morning. Rose returned to Pemberton Park with Lady Prudence, the weight of Isaac's ring on her finger a constant reminder of the cage she'd locked herself into. A wedding was planned for 6 weeks hence. Invitations would be sent. The ton would gossip and speculate. And Rose would continue to be Eleanor, day after day, until she forgot who she'd been before. A letter waited for her at Pemberton Park. Rose recognized Eleanor's handwriting immediately and tore it open with shaking hands. "Dearest Rose, I'm so sorry. I'm with child. Thomas and I are married now, but we cannot return to England. There are complications. Thomas is wanted for a crime he didn't commit. If we come back, he'll hang. Please, I'm begging you, continue as me. Just a little longer. I'll find a way to make this right. I promise. Your loving sister, Eleanor." Rose read the letter 3 times, each word driving nails into her coffin. Eleanor wasn't coming back. Ever. Rose was trapped in this lie permanently. She was still holding the letter when someone knocked on her door. A footman entered with another message, this one sealed with the Duke of Silvermere's crest. Lady Eleanor, we must discuss our arrangement. Meet me at the Pemberton Park stables at noon tomorrow. Come alone. We have much to plan. Signed, I.S. Rose's hands clenched around both letters. Tomorrow she'd face Isaac again, would have to pretend her heart hadn't cracked open during that kiss, would have to be Lady Eleanor instead of Rose, would have to forget that for one perfect moment, she'd felt seen. The next day dawned grey and threatening rain. Rose made her way to the stables, her cloak pulled tight against the wind. Isaac was already there, standing beside a magnificent black stallion. He'd ridden from his estate, was still in riding clothes, his hair windswept. You came, he said, as if he'd doubted. You summoned. Rose kept her voice cool. What did you need to discuss? Isaac's jaw tightened. The wedding. We need to finalize details, coordinate our stories. The ton will have questions. Of course. Business. Rose. Lady Eleanor, she corrected sharply. That's who I am now, remember? Your business arrangement. Your convenient solution. Isaac grabbed her arm as she turned to leave. You think this is easy for me? You think I don't? He stopped himself, breathing hard. Don't what? Nothing. It doesn't matter. He released her. The wedding is in 6 weeks. My solicitor will draw up the marriage contracts. Your dowry will transfer upon our marriage. And then what? I play Duchess for the rest of my life? Lie to everyone, every day, until I die. Unless you have a better solution. Rose laughed bitterly. No. No better solution. They stood in the stable yard, rain beginning to fall, the space between them full of words neither dared speak. Isaac raised his hand, almost touched her face, then let it drop. This is for the best, he said, but he sounded like he was trying to convince himself. Is it? Rose met his eyes. Because it feels like hell. She walked away before he could respond, rain soaking through her cloak. Behind her, she heard Isaac call her name, her real name, but she didn't turn back. She couldn't. 3 weeks passed. Rose threw herself into wedding preparations, choosing flowers and menus and a dress that cost more than her mother had earned in her entire life. She saw Isaac twice during fittings, their conversations stilted and formal. The easy intimacy of that night in the kitchen felt like a dream. Then, on a Tuesday morning, everything changed. Rose was reviewing seating charts when Lady Prudence burst into her sitting room, her face white with fury. She threw a letter onto the desk. Read it. Rose picked up the letter with trembling hands. The handwriting was unfamiliar but elegant. Your Grace, I write to inform you of a terrible mistake. I am Lady Eleanor Margaret Pemberton, daughter of the late Earl of Pemberton. I was told by my sister Rosalind that she would cover my absence briefly while I eloped. I have since learned she has been impersonating me for months and is engaged to marry the Duke of Silvermere under my name. This is fraud of the highest order. I am returning to London immediately to reclaim my identity and title. The engagement is invalid. My sister must face justice for her crimes. I arrive in 1 week. Yours sincerely, Lady Eleanor Margaret Pemberton. The letter fell from Rose's hands. The room spun. Eleanor's coming back, Rose whispered. And when she does, you'll hang. Prudence's voice was cold. Unless you marry the Duke before she arrives. Once you're wed, the marriage is legal. Eleanor can protest all she wants, but you'll be the Duchess of Silvermere. The scandal will be enormous, but you'll survive it. Isaac will never agree. When he finds out Eleanor's alive, that she's coming back. Then don't tell him. Prudence leaned close, her breath hot against Rose's ear. Move the wedding up. Claim you can't wait. Marry him in 3 days instead of 3 weeks. Consummate the marriage. By the time Eleanor arrives, it will be too late. Rose's stomach turned. I can't. You can and you will. Because if you don't, I'll make sure Isaac knows you've been keeping Eleanor's letters from him, that you knew she was alive and planning to return, and you said nothing. He'll hate you for the deception. You'll hang for the fraud. Choose." After Prudence left, Rose sat in the ruins of her life, Eleanor's letter burning like a brand. She could tell Isaac the truth, confess everything, and face his hatred and the gallows. Or she could marry him in 3 days, trap them both in a lie that would destroy them when Eleanor arrived. She looked at the sapphire ring on her finger, at the wedding dress hanging in her wardrobe, at the life she'd built on foundations of sand. Then she picked up her pen and began to write a letter to Isaac, her hand shaking so badly the words were barely legible. "My dearest Isaac, I cannot wait 3 more weeks to be your wife. Please, let us marry in 3 days. I need to be yours. Completely. Forever. Your devoted Eleanor." She sealed the letter before she could change her mind, before she could confess the truth that would set them both free and damn her forever. The die was cast. In 3 days, she'd marry the Duke of Silvermere. In 7 days, Eleanor would arrive and expose everything. And Rose would face the consequences of every lie she'd ever told. What happens when Eleanor returns? Will Rose go through with the wedding, or will she confess the truth to Isaac? And when the real Lady Eleanor appears, will Isaac choose duty or the woman who's stolen his heart? If you're dying to know what happens next, smash that like button, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next part of Rose and Isaac's story. And comment below telling me whether you think Rose should marry Isaac or come clean. This story is just getting started, and trust me, you won't believe where it goes from here. Part 2 is coming soon, and the drama is about to reach levels you can't even imagine. See you in the next one.